The San Antonio Spurs win their first ever NBA championship.
Remember the Alamo. The San Antonio Spurs are NBA World Champions.
The third time in 7 seasons.
Their fourth title in 9 years.
He never sought the spotlight. He never looked to draw attention to himself. Unquestionably a top 10 player of all time. And when you add in his basketball character to the whole equation, he doesn't take a backseat to anyone who's ever played the game.
To think about having done this 5 times, it's amazing to be a part of this for so long.
Welcome into welcome into First Take, coming over from Mike and Mike, as Molly tends to do. I'm Jen Latta, filling in for Molly Qerim here on the First Take desk, joined by, as we continue our radio takeover this week, Waddle and Sylvie from our ESPN Chicago radio station. Waddle, of course, a former Bear. Sylvie, of course, huge Chicago sports fan, decades-long radio and sports career. So these two have the #1 ranked radio show in Chicago. Should be a fun day. My people, salt of the earth people, love the fact that we've got the Chicago vibe rolling here on First Take. So let's get it started with a little NBA talk and, of course, Tim Duncan. San Antonio Spurs forward Tim Duncan announcing, of course, that he will retire after 19 seasons with the organization. Since drafting Duncan, the Spurs won 5 championships, posted a .710 winning percentage, the best 19-year stretch in NBA history. Duncan, of course, ranks 2nd in playoff wins, 1st in playoff double-doubles, 3rd in rebounds, and is one of 3 players to win 1,000 games in his career, gentlemen. Duncan, we've talked about so many great things that he has done, but he came from that class that were drafted in the 1990s that included guys like Shaquille O'Neal, like Kobe Bryant. So, Sylvia, I'll start with you. Where does he rank amongst the greats drafted in the 1990s?
He's amongst the greatest all-time players in NBA history. In the 90s, he's 2nd, though, to Kobe Bryant. It's the Mamba. I mean, this is a guy, they both have 5 championships. But over the long stretch of both of their careers, if you would poll general managers, if you would poll head coaches, and you would ask them, who's the best player in the NBA today? Over the last 2 decades, after Michael retired, you either got Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. And Tim Duncan did win 2 MVPs, back-to-back MVPs in those early 2000s. But when you talk about top 5 MVP voting from 2001 to 2013, Kobe Bryant was top 5 every single year.
But ultimately only walked away with 1 MVP title, correct?
He did.
To Tim Duncan's 2.
But Tim Duncan, 7 times in that span that I just mentioned, in like the last 12, 13 years, did not finish in the top 5 in MVP voting in 7 straight years. This isn't to take away from Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan, slow and steady. And I know this guy knows slow. This is the way he played football. Slow and steady like a turtle. It's the tortoise versus the hare. And maybe in the end, the tortoise was there with a better team longer, but at his height, Kobe Bryant was the man.
Look, these lists and ranking guys, it's so very subjective. And I can't sit here and claim that you're 100% wrong because you make some good points. But if you look at some of the numbers, as Jen mentioned, 19 seasons in the league, 15 All-Star appearances, 8 times he was a first-team all-defensive player in the NBA, 2 MVPs, a guy that did it quietly. Maybe this is more of an argument about style versus substance. The substance is pretty comparable because Kobe has a long list of very lofty accomplishments. The style issue is one that we probably can have a conversation about. Kobe is thought of as this cold-blooded assassin. The truth is, if statistically you look at his performance in crunch time, under 30 seconds in a game, down 3, you know, the outcome is in balance. Kobe Bryant's shooting percentage is well below Tim Duncan. Now, Kobe attempted more shots in those particular situations, but Tim Duncan's shooting mid-40% in those same particular situations. So, look, you're a black hat guy, I'm a white hat guy.
It's not true.
You like the rebels, I like the guys that made, and I'll argue that Tim Duncan made the guys around him better. Again, this is a vote for Tim Duncan, not a vote against Kobe Bryant. And as I mentioned earlier, this is all subjective, but I think Tim Duncan arguably made the guys around him better than Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was more of an individualist out there. So Again, we can have this conversation to the end of time, and I don't know that there is a wrong answer, but I'll take what Tim Duncan did. And another one of the stats that you mentioned, Jen, was 71% winning percentage in the regular season. Better than Kobe Bryant. In the postseason, look what he did as well. Second in all-time playoff wins. He won the same number of titles. He won NBA Finals MVPs. I think that the numbers support Tim Duncan, both in the regular season and in the postseason. I would suggest to you that Tim Duncan's the best player of the era.
Let me give you a couple of other numbers, because when we always talk about Peyton Manning versus Tom Brady, we like to cite that Tom Brady always had better head-to-head play against each other. Crunch time, when it mattered. Waddle can give us all the regular season numbers. When they went up against each other in the postseason, Kobe's teams came out winners 18 out of 30 times. He was 18-12 against Tim Duncan head-to-head. 12 consecutive all-defensive appearances. This is from a guard, not a power forward, or let's face it, a glorified center. Tim Duncan is a top 10 player. There's no doubt about it, but Kobe Bryant has won back-to-back titles. Tim Duncan hasn't either on his resume. And going back to the whole shot percentage when the game is on the line, nobody throughout the years, whether it's in the last 24 seconds to win a game in a close game, whether it's the last 5 minutes, as you mentioned, attempts more. You gotta take them to make them.
Not all of those are good shots, though. At times he's putting his team in a precarious situation because he's taking bad shots. He's trying to do it all by himself. Again, instead of maybe making that extra pass to an open teammate, Kobe wanted the glory more often.
Not the triangle, though. Phil's got the triangle out there.
Stop the triangle talk.
Phil, with his triangle, gave the ball to Michael, and he gave the ball to Kobe in key situations. Look, Duncan has made a high percentage of shots, 29 of 69. Close and late, compared to Kobe's 49 to 175. We're talking about this is the guy that they want to give the ball to when everyone knows he's getting the ball. It's the toughest shot to make, but just giving him the ball is enough of a statement to say there's nobody better on the court to take the toughest shot in all of sport.
On the most important stage, which is the NBA Finals, and if not for the Ray Allen miracle, Tim Duncan would be 6-0 in NBA Finals appearances. Kobe Bryant 5-2 in the NBA Finals. Again, we're splitting hairs here. This is a subjective conversation, but when push comes to shove, I would suggest that Tim Duncan best player of his era. And you know what? I think he gets overlooked at times as well because there was no drama attached to Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan did what he did in a very quiet manner. Like I said, he was a guy that deferred to his teammates. I mean, it was an interesting, we got in late last night, so I was listening to Freddie Coleman driving to the hotel, and it was a really great story that Freddie was talking about. I believe the player he was playing against early in his career was Eton Thomas.
Eton Thomas.
And playing and attempts kind of a half hook, and Tim Duncan blocks it. Going down the court, Tim says to Eton, he says, look, next time, get closer into my body, it's more difficult for me to block that shot. And Thomas was like, I mean, I didn't know if he was talking smack to me or he was just being a nice guy. The next time down, same move. He got more into Tim Duncan's body. Tim Duncan didn't block the shot when they were going back down court again.
That's nice if it's the kids' clinic.
Well, that's fine.
You know what I mean, look, I want my mama to tell the opponent that they stink. And that's what Kobe
White hat
did.
versus black hat. And I'm a guy that likes good guys. You like bad guys. Not necessarily Kobe's not a bad guy.
Look, I'm not going to stand up for everything that Kobe did. You're absolutely right. They did everything the exact opposite. From the way they went out, Kobe went on his tour.
Yeah.
Kobe made it his night, that final game of the year, while Tim Duncan was still on a playoff team.
Tim Duncan's not even going to appear at his own retirement talk today.
Absolutely. So they did it differently. You mentioned the off-the-court drama. Kobe has demanded a trade throughout his career.
Yes.
And Tim Duncan always wanted to stay with Pop.
Took less money.
And the Spurs. You know what happened in Denver.
Yep.
There's no off-the-court problems with Tim Duncan. Plus, you forgot you buried the lead. And shame on you.
I normally do, but I'm not a broadcaster. I'm a former athlete, so you have to give me a little bit of space.
Jen, you'd appreciate this. Tim Duncan, diehard Bears fan.
Oh, yeah.
How about that?
Well, that's also, part of my argument. If Tim Duncan's a Bears fan, he's obviously going to get points for that, too.
Speaking of football, because you did bring up the comparison between Manning and Brady earlier, when a lot of people look at Brady, they do footnote the fact that he's had the consistency of Bill Belichick as his coach, something that Tim Duncan has also been the beneficiary of. What does that do to his legacy and when you put him in these lists where Kobe didn't always have that luxury?
It's a wash to me because you have Pop along with Tim Duncan. You have guys like Ginobili and Tony Parker, and Kawhi Leonard was the most valuable player in their latest championship run. While Kobe had Shaq. You know about the Shaq effect. He's the Kevin Bacon of the NBA. We were told before that like the last 30-plus champions all have some sort of a connection to Shaquille O'Neal.
And we might be talking about Shaq as the best player of this generation had he kept himself in better shape. Because if you look at his first 10 or 12 years, I think they were more impressive than anybody we're talking about.
And Phil Jackson, too, with Kobe. They didn't win until Phil got there. So I think it's kind of a wash on who was surrounding them.
We are having a conversation about pie versus cake, aren't we? Who doesn't like pie? Who doesn't like? We like both, right?
I'm a pecan pie guy.
Well, you'll eat anything because you're a little guy, but you're an overweight little guy. But I mean, that's really what we're arguing about, aren't we? I mean, do you like pie or do you like cake? Either way, you're getting a dessert.
Yeah, obviously both of these guys, the top of the game. When we talk about the best ever, Hall of Famers, certainly they're up there. But it is interesting to note the nuance where some people lean one direction or another, and I think you guys have highlighted that well.
Well, and I think also, listen, it'd be an easier comparison if they played more comparable positions. That's not the case. I mean, we can have this conversation about LeBron and Kobe, and it probably a more coherent and understandable conversation versus a guy who spent a lot of time as a center and a power forward, arguably the best power forward in the history of the game, versus a guy who was a shooting guard and somebody that was doing most of it by himself.
Well, I want the carbon copy of Michael, not the carbon copy of George Mikan. So
Kobe.
Well, you're going Kobe, way back machine there.
He's a big fundamental. That's how he played.
All right.
All right, we are enjoying this conversation, but we want to hear from you guys as well. We have a poll on our Twitter account where you can tell us who you prefer. Which player drafted in the 90s do you consider the best ever? Just head over to Twitter, weigh in, and we will reveal those poll results a little later in the show. Moving on, we continue in the NBA. After trading Derrick Rose to the Knicks, Mike Dunleavy to the Cavs, and losing Pau Gasol and Joakim Noah in free agency, many people are wondering if the Bulls are in full rebuild mode. Then they signed three-time champ Dwayne Wade to a 2-year deal and added Rajon Rondo to a 2-year deal as well. This is right in your wheelhouse, boys, right in your backyard.
Oh, yeah.
Waddle, are the Bulls better off now?
Right now they are. If you zoom in, they are better off. They were a 42-40 team. They missed the postseason for the first time in forever in the Eastern Conference. You add Rajon Rondo, who led the league in assists last year, obviously can still play. Don't know how well he'll get along with Fred Hoiberg. Rajon has had trouble with previous coaches, and Fred Hoiberg had the reputation this past year as being someone who really didn't command the respect of the Bulls in his first season. So that is an interesting dynamic. You add Dwayne Wade, so now you have probably the worst shooting backcourt with regard to three-point attempts and three-point percentages in the entire NBA. You've got 3 alpha males now with Rondo, Dwayne Wade, and Jimmy Butler. You added Robin Lopez in the trade. You're probably going to start Nikola Mirotic at the 4 now. Are they better than last year? Yeah, I think they are better than last year. But the question is, are they a contender? No, because LeBron resides in the East. Are they the second best team or the third best team? I don't believe that's the case either. And at the end of the season, how much closer are you to being a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference? Short term, I think they are a better team. They will get to the postseason. They'll be a lot of fun to watch, and I think the crazy factor is significantly higher this year than it has been in the past. And who doesn't like a good crazy factor?
Good drama, yeah.
Absolutely.
We like crazy.
But, you know, Gar Forman sat in front of the media the night they drafted Denzel Valentine, and they didn't trade Jimmy Butler, and basically suggested that we're going to go younger and more athletic. They didn't go younger and more athletic. So I don't know ultimately what the long-term plan is. Better this year down the line, I'm not so sure they got any closer to an NBA title.
I like to make the comparison to being shipwrecked. The Bulls had a nice little cruise going with Derrick Rose as their MVP, Tom Thibodeau as their coach of the year. Joakim Noah is their heart and soul. All those guys are gone, and instead of being shipwrecked, the Bulls are championship wrecked because LeBron James has stepped in their way. So now when you're shipwrecked, you're desperate. What do desperate people do? They do desperate things. Gar Forman and John Paxson just started blurting out, Rajon Rondo, Dwayne Wade. I don't think they even thought they were getting Dwayne Wade until the very last minute. He made it clear that there was a falling out with Pat Riley and Mickey Aronson.
Dwayne Wade actually even said recently, wish he had another month.
Wish he had another month. I mean, I don't even know if he signed the contract.
Ringing endorsement.
Yeah, so, he wants to play at home. There's two lines of thinking, Jen. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So the Bulls are getting better talent-wise, but I'm from the school of Ricky Bobby.
Me too.
If you ain't first, you're last. And the Bulls, they're not close to being first. So are you closer to being a championship team? And I think the answer is no, except if the Bulls have a healthy Dwayne Wade this year, and if he can recruit from next year's crop of free agency, the Bulls will have a full maximum salary to hand out. Does LeBron really want to play with Dwayne Wade? If so, you got to play somewhere. Why not at the United Center? So
all sounded good in 2010. In 2017, I think
a senior
the ship
circuit
has sailed. And I don't know that Chicago would ultimately be the destination for that crew of friends to get together. There are some that have suggested, hey, what if the Bulls trade Jimmy Butler to the Knicks for Carmelo Anthony, and then somehow, some way, they find a way to bring Chris Paul to Chicago. Now you got the four guys that always wanted to play together.
Super Friends activate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's possible, but
shape of an old school NBA team.
And I'm not so sure that foursome is going to get past the foursome in Golden State anyway.
Well, you mentioned the fact that Dwayne Wade wants to play at home, obviously an Illinois native, and yet money had to play a role in this as well. Do you think the money trumped the fact that, yes, Chicago seemed to be a willing participant in this free agency?
I don't. I think it was more about ego. I think when they're handing out $50 million deals to Tyler Johnson, they're giving big deals to Hassan Whiteside. They're going after Kevin Durant. And Dwayne Wade's like, look at me. I'm giving up all this. I was the one who orchestrated LeBron to Miami. I brought Chris Bosh here. I'm the guy who had the NBA Finals of a generation in 2006. So he says, what about me? I'm not asking for much. You're offering me 40, give me 50. And Pat Riley said, look, I got to know when to say when. Better a year early than a year late. He's got a plan. It doesn't include Dwayne Wade. He only took like $7 million more with the Bulls. So I think this is more about ego and being upset for the last couple years with the Heat.
I don't believe Dwayne Wade in his 13 years in Miami was ever the highest paid player on the Heat roster, which is hard to understand and hard to believe. I will say this. I thought Dwayne Wade did a very classy thing in referencing or answering the questions about the relationship with Pat Riley, and he talked about him as a guy that he will always love, and understood that it wasn't Pat Riley's job to be his best friend. He has to run a franchise. I thought Dwayne Wade, as usual, handled it with a tremendous amount of class. I think he's got something left. He averaged 19 points in the regular season this past year. He was even better in the postseason. Fred Hoiberg's offense is space and pace. They may get the pace with Rajon Rondo, but when they get that space, who's going to knock down that jumper? I mean, we also like to think of as Mike Dunleavy in our town, or Michael Jeffrey Dunleavy, as we like to call him, is no longer here. He's in Cleveland. Do you have any guys that can knock down the three?
Well,
it doesn't look like.
And Nico, and maybe
but he has struggled as well knocking it down. So we'll see. Again, I think they'll get to the postseason. You're a 6th or 7th seed. Maybe you'll surprise some people. Maybe you're a 5th seed. But
can I pitch one more idea for the Bulls here? As long as we're going the crazy route, like Waddle said. You already got Rajon Rondo. He's a wild card here.
Oh,
Dwayne Wade.
Please don't say what I think you're going to say.
Lance Stevenson. Bring him in.
He's been saying this for 3 years.
Bring him in. If we're going to get crazy, let's really get crazy. Let's go nuts here. Lance Stevenson is still available. Lance Stevenson next to Rajon Rondo, next to Jimmy Butler. It's my team. Next to Dwayne Wade, who's going to try and bring it all together and recapture the glory in his hometown. Would you you not pay for that reality show?
Does Fred
Hoiberg
sit on the bench at timeouts and just let the guys talk amongst themselves?
Well, I was wondering what his role was going to be with all of these players out there now. A lot of people say Gar is still calling the shots as far as talent goes and then just shoving it into Hoiberg's lap.
Here, Fred.
Make something out of it. Exactly. All right, an interesting conversation that these two will undoubtedly continue as the Bulls season begins and continues this year. Up next, we're going to break down the NFC North. More familiar territory for these gentlemen.
Yeah.
Is this the year we see Teddy Bridgewater break out for the Vikings? One person at the table thinks they actually have a shot at taking the division from the Packers this year. We'll discuss that after this.
Who's that?
My name.